why are we watching weightlifting? And I was like, well, did we only just go live there, Derek?
I thought we were already live. I'm just going to put my hands up and say I thought we were already live because. But everyone who's in StreamYard has been seeing this, so I mean, it's
perfect.
Yeah, everyone who's been StreamYard has been seeing this. For those of you who've just joined us, welcome to Motherfucker.
all of my plugging of my new podcast.
But this is live.
Funny.
No, this is live on YouTube. The stuff has been already live on StreamYard has been live for our Patreons already. So everyone here has already been enjoying it. Ryan and Laurie and Molly and Dave Bullis. Hey, thank you all for joining us this evening. Hey, getting on. Even you haven't missed anything. It's only the people who are tuning in live on YouTube. And I didn't share the YouTube link. I shared the StreamYard link because I wanted our loyal super Patreons just enjoy the show. Yeah, damn right. And you can ask comments or questions in the comment box. It's there. It's available for you. And don't worry, you'll get another chance to plug your podcast.
Anyway, all I was saying was I watched a huge amount of reruns this weekend, and it did make me feel a little bit sad. It did, when I was watching the opening ceremonies, which is a big commitment to do on your Saturday. It was just that sudden feeling of loss of just we're not getting that. And I don't feel super confident about 2021.
No, I think it's been ambitious enough to think. I think a lot of people, I mean, for most people, this is their first global pandemic. I mean, I think it's fair to say, and
I think that's fair.
So yeah, but again, and I think this might have also been something that we mentioned when I was on the podcast, because I had just come from Equatorial Guinea, but I'd already been back a while, and I had been there during the Ebola pandemic, which wasn't in Equatorial Guinea, but it was fine. And in 2008, I'd been working in Uganda when there was another Ebola pandemic. Right. So when this all started happening, because I made the front page news when I came back with a flu and got, the full Ebola thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then when this all started, when it was all a bit still kind of what's going on? This is going to be fine. We're going to be done in 6 weeks. I was a bit is it me? But luckily, it's all over the world now, so it's fine. It's not just me. Yeah. And I wasn't, and I've never been to Wuhan. So
I'm actually remembering now that I'm in Boston, and Boston was on the finalist list for the 2020 Olympics.
Oh yeah.
And I remember it was just interesting. You're like, look at the Olympics here. What does that actually entail for my personal life? And how does that actually? What does the infrastructure go into around that? And now I'm wow, if that had actually worked out, it would have been absolute hell if we had all this half-built infrastructure all over the place. That was just then oh well.
So
some people say the Olympics there's a curse. So the Olympic cities end up are screwed with that.
Yeah,
that was the big concern. Was that how much of this was going to be was going to be just left behind? That was going to be supposedly low income housing that becomes luxury condos afterward, or just saddles everyone else with debt. Yeah. And now it's it would have been actually nothing also.
So the 2028, which is in LA, their whole bid was the sustainability side to it. So they're actually building little to nothing. So they're using UCLA as the village for all the Olympians. So they're not building an Olympic village, and they're just trying to use stuff because it is so wasteful. And I think this is the issue with the Winter Olympics. Especially because we're not getting that much snow anymore anywhere. It's kind of hard. Whenever there's an Olympics, they have to create snow, and creating snow is one of the worst things environmentally you can do. It causes more snow to melt the next year.
Clearly, we need to adapt. We need to adapt the games to adjust to climate change.
Yeah, exactly. Like the way we
mud
have
skiing.
Yeah, example, we have a ski slope in Wicklow.
How much snow do you usually get in Wicklow?
No, there's no snow on it. It's like Astra or something.
Oh, right.
And if you fall on it, you'll get like your whole. I've never been on it. I'm not like I understand my own limitations.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to hear that Wicklow is a skiing destination.
Yeah,
I'm glad to know I'm not crazy.
they have a practice slope and there's and they have some stuff there, but it's largely it's just so when people are going on skiing holidays they get a practice run first so they don't kill themselves.
I think in Lillehammer they use their like skeleton and bobsleigh stuff during the summer, and you go down with wheels.
Sounds great.
Yeah. I remember that. I think when I was in when I was in New Zealand and down Queenstown, they had a winter resort that would have been all snowy otherwise, but they had just like kind of turned into a kind of a skateboard type park or kind of wheel based entertainment park for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
I suppose that kind of undoes the irony of the classic film Cool Runnings.
Yes, it does.
It does, and there's been incidents like that where where different kind of types of cross country skiing is very different from cross country running and those kinds of things.
Actually,
go ahead.
No, listen. This is just one of the days that I was doing research for one of the podcasts, and like I ended up going down a hole that was many years off what I was meant to be researching, which was that like in one of the early Winter Olympics, so like in the 20s or 30s, there wasn't like a set number of people you needed in the bobsled. So if you wanted, like you could have 5 or 6 pushing. Like it was just kind of like however many people you want that can fit into the bobsled. What's great about the early Olympics is the lack of standardization. It's brilliant.
That's a remarkable thing. I imagine there's probably similar things in relay races and stuff like that. If you had like 10 runners in a relay race,
or what I love is like, and we actually talk a little bit about it in tomorrow's podcast, is that like you don't really have that much space anymore to do something revolutionary, like to completely change the way you do something. Whereas like I think it was 1900 when the Americans came to Paris. They were the first people to ever jump over the hurdles without stopping. So before that time, people would just run up, then they'd reach the hurdle, and then they'd go then do a jump over it rather than pushing a straight leg up. And it's like once somebody does that, it's kind of like that's maybe the way to do it. We might do that, but it's the same. Then a few Olympics later, the first person to go down in a sprint to go from the blocks. Because people would just start from standing, and then like the first person who did that, and was just kind of like, that's much faster.
Gave him that extra second, and I suppose it does seem that way. Obviously, you've dealt with them, and for those of you who just joined us, Ruth is one of our very popular guests from one of our most popular episodes, Polar Bearla. She has just launched a podcast about the Olympics called Olympipod, which is going to hopefully be finish its run or complete the first season when the Olympics is scheduled to rerun itself, or hopefully. And we're talking about how sports ideas of nationality, ideas of rules, and how all these things come along. One of which is I want to talk about those sports that are discontinued because they are odd or unprovable. Olympic walking. Do you like Olympic walking?
I love the Olympic walking. I think it's just like it's like there's plenty of stuff that you can like. There's plenty of controversial stuff you can get me to do. Now in tomorrow's episode, I have to release an apology because I said something very controversial about the 100 meters. But like I think there's 25,000 and the 50,000. First of all, we have an Irish person who isn't that bad at walking, so like you can't take this away from us. We need someone who finishes in the top 20 in one event. Let's keep the 50,000 because it's so ridiculous. 25,000 is fine. 25,000 is fine.
And it is you have, but the big thing is people kept on getting disqualified in Olympic walking because you had to have your ankle at a certain angle to your heel or not the heel, the ball of your foot.
Yeah. So 1906 was the first time they had it, and it was like. The person who wrote about it at the time did say something like, this just goes to show that this should be the first and last Olympics that walking is ever featured in again, because people were just running, because like it was very hard to like get people out. But the problem is that super, like, you can be really unlucky. If you're seen 3 times, you're out. But I think in the last Olympics they brought in like pads on the shoes, and it suddenly like turned out that everyone was cheating.
I remember one sports writer describing it as a married man hurrying out of a brothel with a boner.
It's just so funny the way they're going. I just love it. I think it's brilliant. So much drama to it. So many people like just puking on the side of the road. It's a real sport.
One of a major figure in the Irish language would have been the Norwegian linguist Karl Marstander, who would have been involved in the preparation of the Royal Irish Academy's Dictionary of the Irish Language. He went over to study how Irish is spoken in the west of Ireland in the early 20th, late 19th century. He was an Olympian pole vaulter. And there's accounts in some of the books and memoirs at the time of him impressing the locals and the Blaskets in the Aran Islands by doing little pole vaults for them.
There were quite a few people in the 1906 for America who were Gaelgors, who won gold medals. Who'd gone from the Aran Islands.
Oh, that's the thing,
Yeah, there were all the track and field, like the Irish Whales. There was a whole like legion of them.
Yeah, Irish and Jewish athletes were the ones who really like were miles apart in the early days.
And this is the thing, is I suppose that the broad category of athletics, and that maybe a lot of team sports are traditionally associated with like a lot of team sports are typically associated with a larger community, with maybe often with colleges. American football and basketball have always been associated with colleges, as opposed to kind of maybe athletics possibly has a lower entry point for people who are maybe outsiders.
Yeah, no, there is definitely an aspect to that people can run even if they don't have good equipment. But 1904 St. Louis. There's also a bit of GA.
No way.
There's absolutely there's like a little kind of passing reference to it having happened, and we don't know whether it was hurling or football. But
there was some Gaelic sports played at the Olympics, and this is one of those things that I'm surprised more people don't know that, because that's kind of a big thing. Because the GAA would have been only like over 20 years old at that stage.
Yeah. And actually, we do talk about somebody who won a medal in 1908 tomorrow, who was on the winning team of the All Ireland when London beat Cork.
Oh.
in the first half of the 1990s.
Fantastic. That's.
I didn't verify that fact, but I don't think anyone should. That's fine.
No, I think I can't imagine any Cork person having a problem with that. They tend to be quite magnanimous when people point out flaws in their city.
Yeah. Anyway, I suppose it was a very gutsy thing for me to do, given that everyone follows me not for sport, to suddenly decide that I was going to do a sports podcast. But I can also still talk about animals. So if there's any questions out there about animals,
wait, you care about animals? What?
Okay,
yeah, that was sort of
for most people, like the Ruthie Fizz Twitter account was initially. I think you spiked ahead and you called yourself Not the Ireland account, and around this time, there was issues with the Ireland account. The Ireland is the best known rotating curator account in Twitter for Ireland. There was similar accounts like Sweden and some other countries which were generally discontinued. There have been one or two issues with some curators picked for the Ireland account, possibly who used bad faith applications, and no shade in anyone. I think possibly that. And then around this time, it was the idea was is there a better way to do this? But you around this time you rechristened your account, Not the Ireland account, and you created some very interesting threads in which you discussed issues ranging from consent to bears.
Yeah, I mean, they all had an animal. They all had an
bear
animal.
The animal, or
yeah. So
okay.
like, I feel very strongly that we should reintroduce Kamchatka brown bears. I mean, the Kamchatka brown bears have never been in Ireland, but that we should introduce brown bears into the Phoenix Park. Now, I talked about this when I was on the podcast, and unfortunately, things haven't moved as quickly as I would like in the last 18 months. But look, it's still there. Obviously, the global situation is kind of slow things down, but like, yeah, I mean, let's say 2024. Let's have 2 brown bears in Phoenix Park.
This is. I'm glad you brought this up, because when we released the podcast, had Eamon Ryan made his wolf remarks at that stage?
No, I'm an influencer.
I wrote an article for the Journal in which I talked about the idea of I referred to existing research which talked about the benefits of reintroducing wolves to Ireland. And then the next day, Eamon Ryan was talking about how maybe we should reintroduce wolves. Phoenix Park. It makes more sense to have a natural predator there than to have some park ranger shoot 60 deer when the deer population goes too high. It makes more sense. And you had already been saying we should reintroduce Kamchatka Peninsula, which is the closest species to the ancient Irish bear.
Well, I mean, I definitely probably said that. I'm not sure there's any scientific research backing that up. I mean, I potentially did say that. I don't know if we should necessarily believe that, because polar bears have a lot of mitochondrial DNA associated with the brown bears in Ireland. Okay. So it would be easier for us to introduce polar bears, but I think it just might be a bit too hot. The reason for the Kamchatka brown bears is because they're known as the largest and the friendliest of all the brown bears.
Well, if we're going to have a bear in Phoenix Park, we want him to be friendly. We don't want him running off with the president kind of by the neck.
No, and now I will say there was a bit of an incident about 10 years ago where 3 of them did kind of taint the name of the Kamchatka brown bears, terrorized a oil refinery, killed a few people.
They shouldn't have been there. Those people shouldn't have been there.
There's still...
Wait, brown bears were attacking the oil refinery?
I don't know. I mean,
are they comrades?
It's potentially. I mean, it was in Kamchatka. It's quite, it's not exactly connected to a lot of places. So I think it was just a village outpost for the oil workers, and they terrorized the place for a little bit. But I agree. That's not a victim blame, but
you mentioned the possible names. My son Art has which is Irish for a bear, and he has a bear called Soft Bear.
Oh.
So I think that'd be a nice name for a Kamchatka bear that lives in the park and is friends with the president.
So that's what I had actually asked when I was on the podcast, was that we needed a good name.
Soft Bear, and Art is a classic name for a bear.
I know, but we needed a proper at the name of the species.
Because the Irish for bear is bear.
Yeah.
And some people find that it's tricky, and then and it sounds a lot like the Irish for the bar is spelled also BAR with a fad on the other vowel, with the so a bear bar, we a bear bar, and it's two.
Which
two words.
I'm okay with having a bear bar.
Also, isn't the case though that bear, the word bear is itself then derived from Brún, which was then the nickname for what they were calling, in a very Voldemort way, were referring to these beasts. So it was the nickname because you weren't allowed to say the monster's name. Yeah, so bear itself is just a mistranslation of a nickname for thou which shall not be named.
Yeah.
This is the thing. You get this also, the idea that say that the wolves being called the sons of the countryside, it was a euphemism, and even in Dracula when he talks about the children of the night, it's a euphemism, and Bram Stoker probably misunderstood the idea of the euphemism.
He probably misunderstood a lot of things.
Oh, Bram!
And I'm not even talking about the vampires. That's fine. He got that fine. That's fine. That's not my issue with him.
So he probably thought the vampires call them the children of the night because they love them so much. So people call them children of the night because they don't provoke the wolves. But Beowulf means wolf, but it means bee wolf because it's a bear is like a big wolf. It stands on its hind legs and eats honey. So he likes bees, and he likes being furry. So, but
I like whales as well. Mealmores, like that. Like I like.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful word.
Mealmore is gorgeous, and I love the fact that mule it can mean a louse. And a mealmore is like an absolutely massive flea.
Yeah. But what's your favorite animal?
You get that like insight.
What's your favorite?
My favorite animal, I think, possibly the wolf. I think that the various names for Frail and Mochtira for wolves, I just think are gorgeous. I think Art as a name for an old name for a bear is also lovely, and I like how it's I think, but there are some other kind of cool animal names which are great. I think Shunnock, and I'm beginning to hear about people giving it as a name.
That's my new one. Like as in like I've kind of how I feel about foxes has changed since the lockdown. Yeah. So like I never really thought about Shunnock before, but like I just think it's a very good word because I don't think fox really encapsulates how I actually feel about foxes anywhere. I just feel like the foxes have been very cheeky over the last few months. Like they're kind of been like knowingly cheeky, like, and they're just always there. And like the thing about it is, there's a lot of foxes in Dublin. Like it's one of the highest concentration of foxes in the world, and that's an actual fact. That's not just a Ruth fact. That's an actual fact.
You know why this is?
You
know why this is?
Why?
We don't have enough posh weirdos in red coats and horses.
If only I had more of those.
Chasing them down. We all know. I mean, the most efficient way of pest control is to have a bunch of posh lads and their mates put red coats and hard hats on, chase a fox with all their dogs, because that's the most efficient way to deal with the pest problem. And people defend fox hunting by saying, "Well, without it, we'd be overrun with foxes." And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So I mean, like the couple of things that like have happened, like aside from it, just like them constantly following me, which is just like, which is fine. Like, but I just sort of feel like since the lockdown, and I know it's because there's not as much food because restaurants haven't been open and all of that. But I saw this is the first thing. This is like 2 weeks into the initial lockdown. I saw a fox like just running past with a chicken tikka sandwich. And I was like,
they're very resourceful.
But I was like, where did you get that? Like did somebody in a deli make that? Like, where did you get that chicken tikka sandwich? But anyway, then like lots of little things happened. And then a few weeks later, I was just walking down the road and it was like 6 or 7 o'clock. We weren't talking in the middle of the night. And this fox ran across the road with a big load of cream crackers in its mouth, which, look, it's living its life, that's fine. But then it dropped one of the crackers on the road as was crossing. So it went over, placed his other cream crackers on the wall.
Is this a fable? Is this a fable? Are you slipping off?
I live in a fable, Derek, okay? So then he ran back into the roads to get his cracker. And like, there was a car that had to screech to a halt. And this is where like the fox, like he just turned around, looked at the car with the cracker in his mouth, and then just kind of did a...
See, I thought this was going to be a morality tale about how it's better to have 9 crackers in your mouth than the one on the road.
No. He lived the next day. But here's my thing. I think like in that sort of instance, you can't go, fox. What you have to do is Shunnock. Like there's a lot more. There's a lot more like you can do with that word. There's a lot more kind of like nuance to that word. It's like, what's going through your mind?
So much of my Irish is visual. Like I'm reading on Twitter, I'm like in a book, and like so I don't get to hear it out loud as often. And so like I can recognize Shunnock, but like hearing it said, it just like doesn't sound the same in my head as that loud. And I'm like, oh yeah, that is just like a meaty and just fitting.
Well, if I was driving down the road and I'm thinking just that kind of road past when you're going kind of through around Grand Canal Dock, and a Shunnock or a fox is just on the road, nicking cream crackers, looking at me, I'd be like, "Ooh, Motherina ro, Motherina ro, tog. See, that's when a Madararua kicks in. You're a red dog. Get out of here. And you're ugly.
I'm Team Shunnock then rather than mother
I guess in the context of the dog being annoying, because I think that song, the lyrics of that song, when you translate it, I'm thinking of Paul Nikeji, or her episode, we talk about translating Irish songs. Oh, fox, you're ugly. That's what that song means. It sounds, oh, Madarina ro 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 ro, Madarina ro ta now. It's like, yeah, you're an ugly fox. I don't like you. You killed me chicken. But like, yeah, I mean, it's and also, where did they get the cream crackers?
I know. So this is the thing. This where you need to.
And this dovetails nicely, because there's been some interesting what they call nature is healing discourse online since the pandemic. The idea that the changes in human activity have led to a change in the natural world response, and some people have shown a kind of coded misanthropic nature. The idea that actually that it would be a good thing at a pandemic amongst humans would be a good thing for nature. It'd be great for the endangered kind of a purple dandelion if 1,000 people died, or something like that. And so, I mean, I guess the phrase eco-fascism was one I may have heard once in the past 10 years, and I've heard 100 times in the past 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of like eco-fascism. Maybe it's different in the States. There's a very like distinct like white supremacist vibe with eco-fascism, where it is like this kind of crazy thing. I'm just like, great. Well, if we wipe out all the undesirables, that will make nature better for the rest of us rich white folk to enjoy. And so there's definitely a streak of that, and a lot of them are also weirdly into oil, which really confuses me.
Yeah, and also like, I mean, especially because obviously we think Corona came from either bats or pangolins. It brings back this whole discourse of bushmeat. And people, like, I think bushmeat is bad. Bushmeat is bad, so I'm not going to say anything else. But generally speaking, like when I was living and working in Equatorial Guinea and Cameroon, the reason people turned to bushmeat was because there was no longer fish close to the sea. That was, a poor people's food. People could go out on a small boat and get fish, but now there were super trawlers from China, from the US, from France, from Ireland, taking all the fish. So suddenly there were international companies building massive roads into the rainforest. So people suddenly had access to deep within the rainforest, and they were able to get protein. But this was not a thing that was happening for the last 50 years. This is something that is only recently really accelerated. And it's very easy to kind of like be talking about people like, how could they possibly eat a chimpanzee and then cause Ebola? When it's not as simple as that.
That's good to know too, because I guess I always assumed that like I knew bushmeat was a thing, but I guess I assumed like a lot of things, it's desperation. You have people who need food. And so I was like, I'm not gonna judge what you end up eating in this case because you need to, but I didn't think about how the way that like the like the colonists essentially they kind of coming through, tearing down paths through the rainforest made that more accessible, that it wasn't happening otherwise. That's interesting.
Yeah, but also we don't like it when we eat wild mammals, but we're perfectly okay when we eat wild fish and take all the fish out of the ocean. That's an acceptable thing. That's like, it's acceptable to eat tuna. It's not acceptable to eat a pangolin. I don't think you should eat a pangolin. I do eat tuna. So like it's I'm not being a sage here, but like I
eat octopuses and I think they're probably superior to us. So I mean, and delicious.
It's a funny one because I think like most people, like there's some people. You have vegetarians and vegans who've given a certain amount of thought into how they eat, and actually ethical meat eating is a thing in that you can say, actually, yes, I do know where I draw the line. And actually, these things, like for me, a big thing is I think buying meat and throwing it out is just completely messed up. I think it's weird for an animal to give its life to become food and then to not eat the food. Like that's just that's deeply disrespectful, and I have an issue with that. But ultimately, the big thing is that most people, a lot of meat eaters, don't actually think about the meat process. They're disconnected from it. Even recently, there was I was watching this film in which a lobster was being prepared. Not Annie Hall. Haven't watched that film since. but it was Julie and Julia. But there was the big thing. There's probably seafood is one of the lobster might be the last thing remnant of a world when people bought animals to eat them, and the animals are still alive. Whereas that maybe 2 generations ago, it was normal to buy a goose and have the goose running around the house for a few hours before the preparations began.
So my dad always used to make us race the lobsters on the kitchen floor before we put them in the pot, and I there was no one was thinking about this, but now as I'm older, I'm like, that's really cruel and inhumane. Why did we do that?
So I gotta, no.
You're first in the pot. Hooray! Like,
there's a theory in ethical meat preparation. They talk about the happy animal has one bad day at the office, and like that's a very bad day to make them race around. Like,
you never did race very well.
You treat the animal with respect, and like 4,000 years ago, the Book of Leviticus said, listen, like if you want to eat an animal, don't let it see other animals being killed. Kill it in one blow so it doesn't feel any pain. And like, that's it. You don't need to be, 21st century woke AF to realize, yes, that 4,000 years ago, they realized, do it right.
Don't be a
dick to the animal. Yeah, don't be a dick.
Okay, so this is a nice little way to completely change the subject, because this is something that I wanted to talk about when I was on your podcast, and then we ended up talking about a lot of other stuff, including like the failed Franklin expedition to the Arctic and lots of other stuff. But so basically, a few years ago, I was in the zoo. And actually, Dad, you have heard this before, because sometimes when I've had a couple of glasses of wine in me, I do ask you this anyway. But anyway, so I was in the zoo, and there was a whale skull going past, and I heard like a teacher going, "Oh, Gall gorilla," and it just kind of struck me that it shouldn't be Gall gorilla; it should be Bert gorilla. And I feel like.
Yes, I've discussed this with Patter, and that I think it should be Bert chimpanzee but he's not.
Well, so this is the thing. I was thinking about this before we started doing this, because I was thinking like, do I think it should be Bert chimpanzee? And I'm actually not so sure, because they're kind of dicks, and I'm not sure they deserve to be that. But then I was thinking about octopus, and I feel like just like octopus should. Like, if you see 3 octopus, that should be Cheshire octopus.
Because they've got so many legs.
Yeah, they also have 2 hearts.
I think I know what you mean. The fact that counting in Irish has a different method for counting human beings than for counting animals or other property is something that some vegans find problematic. And
that's not my issue.
Yeah, but also that's the idea that some animals are so person-like that maybe they should be counted with the method we use to count, people. And instead of saying so Bert, like we say Bert dinner, and as opposed to Gaw, chimpanzee.
Yeah, I just feel very strongly about gorillas, and like I know that like say chimpanzees and bonobos would be even closer to us. I think what we need to do is like sit down and standardize this. Basically what we'll do is we'll get some people who are much better at Irish than me to do the grammar side of it. And what they'll do is they'll hold up a picture of an animal and they'll go, what's this, Ruth? And then like, I'll say whether it's Bert or Bull. And like, it will be really complicated for the first few years, because you'll have to just learn if it goes with the animal. We might have to come up with a third way of counting for it, because when I studied Old Irish, there were three ways of counting.
Yeah.
There was the third way was if it was in pairs, but it's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but in like 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pair, but like it was its own number system. So yeah, no, I think for bears we need to come up with a third system. Because they're kind of on a different level. They're like on a slightly spiritual level. We're not like personifying them.
You can't say their name.
Yeah. So we need to come up with that. But
my wife and I just finished rereading for me. To my newborn son who can't understand a word of it. There's a novel called "We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves" by Karen Joy Fowler, who was a teacher of mine, and it's a brilliant novel. But it's a lot about how, especially in the States, in the kind of 30s through 70s, there were these experiments of people raising chimpanzees with humans just to see what would happen. And this novel kind of extrapolates like, okay, but like what happens after that? That. So like this is like you have a child and you've raised this child as a twin to a chimpanzee, and at some point that chimpanzee experiment ended and left your home, and now this child is an adult and is missing her twin sister? Question mark. And thinking about how you would count that would be really complicated because that's kind of a large. I mean, it's part and parcel to this, not to this story. Is about like how, as far as like this is a sibling of this family. It's part of this family. It's a child of this family. Mm-hmm. In this case, it was raised as such.
Yeah.
How would it not be counted then?
I think so. And there's evidence, I suppose, of chimps learning some sign language and things like that as well. And but it's
and in Congo, the film, Amy Goodbrother.
Got to say, there's Congo. They said that you can tell a lot about a person from the first Tim Curry movie they think of.
Rocky Horror.
Yeah. See,
I mean, potentially Muppet Treasure Island.
Yeah, I would have always thought he was that Muppet Treasure Island guy, and then years later, I saw Rocky Horror, and I was like, oh wow! So now I understand why he's a film star.
I think Rocky Horror or Clue.
Clue, yes, and also there was another. He's an Annie. Because I think my wife, the first Tim Curry film, she thought it was Annie. And I was like, it's not really a Tim Curry film. But yeah, apparently so. Apparently that says more about me than her. But yeah, so on Friday, Tom, your episode is going to come out, and Ruth's here will say we are talking about the much maligned group that are Irish Americans and how this perception has changed in your own lifetime.
Yeah. We are a complicated, messy bunch.
Is like there's a lot of embarrassment, I suppose, or kind of discussion in Ireland about the amount of Irish surnames in Trump's kind of entourage and support and on Fox News and things. Is this something that's been noticed in America itself at all, or are we just being overly sensitive?
It's been noticed in America, but I think not in the way that people in Ireland would have noticed it. I think it is unfortunately often used as a kind of an excuse. It says like, oh, you have Bill O'Reilly. Well, he's successful and he's Irish. Therefore, like, why can't these blacks do this? Why can't these Mexicans do this? And that's what it ends up kind of being. And then you're like, well, things are a lot more complicated than that. Thank you, sir. The fact that like a white immigrant can be like assimilated into that in that way speaks volumes. Over 100 years speaks volumes actually about the exact issues we were talking about. Thank you very much. And it's also frankly embarrassing for those of us who are typically who are either aware of Irish history or are are passionate about more progressive issues, when it feels like you're ignoring the history and struggle of your forefathers in that case and the things that they may have stood for, and in order to kind of really keep your power controlled and centralized. And it's really, really just, I find, disappointing in those ways. But it's also like, I certainly know those guys. Like my dad certainly, plays golf and goes to the pub with those guys. And I think when he was younger, it seemed kind of okay. And as they've gotten older, they've gotten more and more awful of the Bill O'Reilly types. And
since Kamala Harris was nominated as a vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, there's been a sharp spike online in the Irish slaves myth.
Yep, that's my favorite one to get into fights with relatives on Facebook.
I was saying that imagine if every time someone mentioned the imagine if every time someone mentions 1798 in Ireland, that the Wolf Town Rising says, listen, first of all, we just spent 4 minutes explaining why this is different from the French Revolution. Or imagine if every time someone mentioned World War II, said, listen, we have to spend 5 minutes explaining why this is slightly different from Vietnam. And it feels like now, like, we can't talk about indenturement as say factually.
I think that's the Irish slaves narrative thing there. The frustrating part about it is that, I suppose this is perhaps to the credit of the terrible propagandists who have hijacked it for their purposes, is how much it is like a self-defeating argument that you're like, yeah, so they were indentured servants. So they suffered a lot and then were set free and then could assimilate. Unlike people who had every generation in their bloodline was locked into ownership by another family. this is the clear difference that sets those two things apart. And that is the difference we should be noting. But some terrible evil genius was like, no, what if we pretend they're the same? And yeah, they're not. Like, the argument itself on the very surface falls apart. And yet it is frustratingly used anyway.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but hopefully, you know, by talking about it, we can get there. And for those of you who've joined us, Tom is the guest on Friday's episode, and we're all looking forward to hearing that. And it's I think it was a very entertaining chat. I think I'm looking forward to sharing it all with you.
I hope I didn't say anything too radically embarrassing.
No.
My ranting of getting on about these things.
We cut out that bit when you criticized Michael B. Higgins.
I would never. Anyone who follows me on Twitter knows I would never.
Great stuff. So, Ruth, Phoenix Park, how can we make it more ecologically balanced?
We know. I've already explained it. 3 bears, 2 females, 1 male. We then build some highways. We'll do glass ones that go over to different spots around Ireland, including Glendalough. We'll go over to Connemara. We'll go everywhere. And then within 5 years, we can have like a population of like 40 or 50.
And yeah, and we can keep a couple of bears in Glenveigh, a couple of bears in Killarney National Park. You know,
Aren't there some bears in Donegal? I'm pretty sure, like when that came out, like loads of people sent me like links to the Donegal bears. Now they're in cages, so not quite the same. But like,
you're thinking about our famous, our beloved occasional guest Anton Biogagola, who is our beloved Donegal bear. But
I'm being so historic.
Oh yes, I need to be serious with this.
You're taking away from my bear reintroduction projects. Like there's absolutely nothing that can go wrong with my plan. And as I said, we'll have bear highways, which will be glass bottomed, so like you could just be like sitting around and like go, oh, there's a bear.
You know the way they reckon that Boher comes from Bow here, like a place for cows to pass through.
Yeah.
Would these called bear here?
Yeah.
Bear here.
But like, yeah, they're here. But like up high here, they're
here. Yeah. Here be bears.
Here be bears. Yeah, that's great. I like it. I'd like to be in charge of the tender process, because I don't really want this to go over 5.5 billion. Like, I don't want to go a bit of a children's hospital route. Then we're paying 11 billion, and people are going like, "Well, we only have 30 bears." So yeah, I think 5.5 is fine.
You don't want to get in a situation you put a lot of money down in front, and then there's all these additional costs that they didn't tell you about. You know,
exactly. Yeah,
you got to take everything on board.
Exactly. But yeah, so then the Phoenix Park will be fine, because then we don't have to get. We might have a few kind of like large hives just for the bears to be.
Could there be a GDPR issue with tagging the bears, with microchipping the bears?
No, there couldn't.
But it's their data where they're going.
I have no issue.
You can't tag them without their consent in that case.
Yeah, well, I'll get their consent. No problem.
There's been a lot of concern that the COVID app is being used to track people and take away their freedoms. And I mean, so like, surely the bears would have similar concerns. I mean, you get 3 bears.
Like, what if it drains all the bears' battery?
Statistically, one of the bears is going to have strong opinions on personal liberty.
Luckily, they can't talk, and they don't have proper thumbs to file reports.
So there's a big soft paw print to suggest they consent to having being microchipped and COVID app. Yeah,
but you are right about their batteries wearing down fast. That is a serious issue to consider.
Yeah. Did you see Cloudberry? The sorry, it's not very professional, but I'm gonna have to Google Cloudberry. I think she possibly was a ring seal. Yeah, she was a ring seal. Nobody knows how she turned up in Ireland, because she's like, they're an Arctic animal.
Oh.
But she was brought down to Wicklow's Sea Rescue Ireland, and the Irish seals, they didn't cover themselves with much Laurie. They kind of bullied her, but she was boisterous and very, very fat, and like she was just a circle. She was just like when she was arrived, she was underfed, and then she just became this giant circle, as ringed seals are wont to do. But the plan was to either bring her to Iceland or Norway to release her, but then COVID hit, so they had to. I mean, they say they had to go and release her in Donegal. I personally think you could just put her in a freezer for a bit, but it was going to be summer, so they had to go up. But like they didn't. I don't think they put a tracker on her, and like, they did essentially just like throw her into the Atlantic Ocean, and was just kind of like, "Bye, Cloudberry."
That's You, out of courtesy, you don't have to look at the tracker. You just put the tracker on to let them know you care what happens to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can't just like put it out. But obviously, this came up in the episode. Obviously, when we talked with the Irish for sea lion being like Rowan Moore, like a big sea lion, a big seal. Again, that's obviously you have big seals and you have sea lions that are quite trim and maybe sensitive about their appearance and don't want to be called. Just like be defined as being like that.
Yeah.
But I
don't know. Like,
no, but the whales don't want to call Beyond More.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes Irish can be very blunt with the namings.
Yeah, it can be a bit hurtful sometimes in how some of these things are.
And then sometimes it's not a huge amount of like I feel like there's a huge amount of opportunity for things like leopard seal. Like we could come up with a proper like Roan cunt or something. I don't know. We could come up with like a really good name, but
there's a brand new English Irish dictionary coming out this very year, a new edition of folklore.
Nobody has consulted me. Dark, would you believe?
And it'll be very interesting to see because obviously they've been the lads in Terma out in Fiunter and DCU have been taking great care to add new terminology and to check it and to recheck it just in case it subsequently turns out to be more valid. So we're all very looking forward to seeing this new edition of the Irish print dictionary. It's massive. It's the first one in 42 years. So
I'll be
it's
looking
exciting times, and it'll be very interesting to see if they have words for that and other species of animals. So if anyone has any questions before we wrap up, I mean, you can post them here in the comment box on if you're watching StreamYard. If you are watching us live on YouTube, you can of course message the Irish 4, and I'd be delighted to see that if there's any questions there. Before we do get any questions of that nature, before we get any questions of that nature, obviously, Ruth, you have this new podcast out. Some people who maybe joined us later on may not have caught it. It's called Olymp Pod. Do you want to tell us?
Yes, we're covering every Olympics from 1896 to 2021. We're hoping that we will have a 2021 to report on.
Yes.
But yes, in the meantime, I really need people to listen to it. We've got a very global, as I said at the beginning, we've got a very global listenership. It's very niche. We had one person in Vietnam who listened to it and decided it wasn't for them. But then we have some people in Argentina who've come back every time. So, we're more going for the Argentinian market than the Vietnamese market, we've decided. But it's very entertaining, or so many people have said. And it's brilliant. And the fact that not everybody is listening to it is, I suppose, a little bit shocking and not very, it's not particularly easy to understand. But here we go.
It is truly appalling.
Sorry?
It's truly appalling. I agree. I'm supporting.
We're fairly sure that from
could be the data collection issue, perhaps. There wasn't consent given by the SEALs who were listening to your podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fine. We're seeing a pickup, and we're not worried. It's a labor of love. We're going to do it anyway. But yes, no, we are. We have had a number of amusing guests. We actually had Paddy O'Leary, who is an ultra runner based in San Francisco for 1904, which is the St. Louis Games. And in the St. Louis Games, the marathon was just appalling. Talking about Irish Americans, John E. Sullivan, he was this white supremacist head of the American Olympic Committee, and he decided that he wanted to test like whether or not it was a good idea to dehydrate bodies during a marathon. So during like this sweltering heat, he decided there'd be only 2 water stations, I think at the 10 and the 20 mile mark. And so a lot of people came near to death. One person decided to take a lot of strychnine and had to be carried over the line, and he was the eventual winner. One person just decided to take a car, which was all very exciting. But then when we got Paddy to like chime in, and he's an ultra runner, he was just like, yeah, I mean, kind of sounds fine. Like I often don't have water for 40 miles. I was like, for fuck's sake, Paddy.
No, we know what we want to hear here, you know. That's great.
Like, I would have won easy, like without the strychnine or the brandy.
I think there's a risk when you're talking to Olympians that they have maybe a very high kind of sense of their own qualities, and it's at a high level of self-belief that can often lead them to say yes. When they hear our story hard, they go, I could beat that. It's often said, yes.
We were asking people at the start and ourselves that, like, in this particular Olympics, first of all, one sport you'd take out for the modern games and replace it with. But the other is, would you have won anything? And what would you have won at this particular Olympics? And that's going to get harder and harder. Like, I mean, when we get to 1994, that might be, 96. 96. I haven't got that far yet. We're only on 1908.
Before we wrap up, what is your favorite discontinued sport?
I've been learning a lot about cycle polo, which was founded in Wicklow, and which Ireland was very good at.
Cycle polo sounds amazing.
Yeah, there's some great footage of it being done.
It's basically like Quidditch for people who are, not horrible.
Why isn't Quidditch in the Olympics yet? That was my question.
Because rowling is cancelled.
Yeah, and also because, like,
fair.
I do like a good tug of war.
You catch the snitch, and that's the whole thing. Imagine if you paid massive tickets for an All Ireland, and you're bringing your dad and your grandson, and you're all looking for this game, and then some hurler catches a snitch, and it's over in 4 minutes. You'd be furious.
Yeah.
So I went to Emerson College in Boston, and we are notoriously not athletic, but we did have an international championship Quidditch team. But there is a very famous game in Emerson College lore because the snitch was allowed to run around the Boston Common, and that was as long as they were on the Boston Common, it's fine. And one snitch got.
This is a person dressed up as a snitch.
Yes. This was against McGill in Montreal. This game, so it was an international game, mind you.
Okay.
The snitch hopped on the train on the Boston Common and rode it the one stop to the other corner of the Boston Common, and just rode the train back and forth on those 2 stops. And it was like a 6-hour game because no one could find the snitch riding the train back and forth.
I thought it was a terrible suggestion, but I'm coming around to it. Like, I mean,
it's kind of funny watching everyone run around with between their legs, but
Yeah, but I'm starting to see the potential.
There's serious strategy in this game.
I'd prefer if it wasn't called Quidditch. Like, I'd prefer if we standardized the game and didn't give it the Harry Potter name.
Cycle polo sounds amazing. It's something that people can really. I think people can bring
really
a snitch
into it. Like, we can try and combine the two and have cycle polo snitching.
And it's part of Ireland's sporting history. I think I want to bring this back. I want to bring it back. In fact, I want the GAA to code it and get it included with the minor GAA sports like rounders, handball, and there's others, aren't there? There's other kind of miscellaneous.
Let's really work on this. And tomorrow's guest is also in on it. Comedian and former triple jump, I think, champion. That might be making it up. That might be a different. It might be a different discipline. David O'Doherty is going to be on tomorrow, and we're going to try and get him. What he wants to standardize is road bowling.
Road bowling.
Yeah, it's popular in a couple of villages in Ireland where you have to hurl a giant circular rock down a road.
I can see how that could be entertaining. It's Yeah, but that's road bowling.
But look, there's no reason that we can't do both.
I'm committed to cycle hurling, though. So Olympipod is what it's called. You have
Olympipod,
David O'Doherty, National Treasure David O'Doherty, as your guest tomorrow. It's a very exciting show. We're delighted to have you back. Delighted to see you're doing so well since we gave you an opportunity for stardom all that time ago. We're always thrilled to catch up with one of the nicest people on Irish Twitter, one of the most wholesome and positive forces and entertaining human beings on an otherwise imperfect social media platform. Thank you so much, Ruthie
Thank you. Lovely. Everyone follow Ruthie Fizz, but also Olympipod, and make sure you do listen to all of those episodes. I'll know because I'll be looking on Captivate. I'll be seeing the statistics. So there better be like a big surge this evening now.
Excellent. And thank you also to Tom Dunn, who's going to be the guest on Friday's episode about evolving perceptions of Irish America. Thank you so much for joining us, Tom. I know how busy you are with a new Smalley.
It's okay. Mom just left, so I have freedom for an hour. It's great.
Enjoy every second of it. Don't waste it. Listen to me. And for the rest of you all, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will be putting this out on YouTube after it's been released, and my editor has and Brian has edited out the unnecessary bits and hopefully fixed that beginning. And so thank you all again for joining us, and we'll have a new episode for you on Friday. Slán go fóill. Iwa.
Slán.
Slán.